There's a precise order inside a beehive, an ecosystem built on instinct and sacrifice. Worker bees die for the hive. Foragers fly the farthest and bring back the pollen that feeds everyone else. They know they won't live long. Nurse bees tend to larvae that aren't theirs. Guard bees sting and sacrifice themselves to protect the home. Bees don't know when to slow down. They don't know when to rest, when to stop, or when the hive is asking too much. They'll work themselves to exhaustion, sometimes to death, because the mission always feels more important than the body carrying it. The hive is one of nature's rarest forms of selflessness.
Where we've been watching homes burn to the
News
ground
is very
all
much the
morning.
same.
It's an exhausting experience. I'd do my live shot and then I would go home and I would just collapse. I was just so tired.
For years, Joe Vazquez chased stories like a worker bee.
We were routinely being robbed, photographers being attacked. That put a great deal of fear into the crews.
Even the strongest hives have their breaking point.
Tons of conversations about how do we fix this? How do we keep the inevitable from happening? One of us is going to get hurt.
Too much threat, too much smoke, too much heat, and the colony collapses. In news, we call it burnout, PTSD, but it's the same truth. If the hive stays under constant threat, the bees can't survive. This is Honeypod, where words heal, hearts rebuild, and purpose buzzes loud. This episode is supported by Madrala Law Firm, our go-to for contracts, clarity, and creator protection. And TrueCore Wellness, where Nalandra helps us rebuild from burnout with real tools that actually work. Hey, honeys. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Honey Pod. I'm Paulina Bucka, and today we are joined with Joe Vazquez. Now, Joe and I know each other from San Francisco. You were my mentor in San Francisco. You were the person who said, there's something that you should be doing out in the field versus behind the scenes. And so you took a chance and you said, come on out into the field and I'm going to teach you what you need to know to go out into the field. And I don't know that I was as receptive, or I don't know if I saw anything in myself the way that you saw. I'm glad that you did. It ended up, giving me almost a 10-year career. It was definitely a lot of nerves in the beginning.
So you're blaming all this on me.
All of it on you. You're the reason.
Yeah. I mean, you are just all fire in the belly, charge forward, come with me or get out of my way. That's how you are. So I think I just helped you find the path toward helping you find what, you wanted to do. And really, if you're going to be in journalism, being out in the field is where it's at. And I think I made a suggestion to you and maybe gently prodded you in that direction and said, this is where it's at. That's where the fun is. Get out there in the field and you're welcome to come shadow me anytime. And, I'm paying it forward because a lot of people did that for me. It's such a unique skill, isn't it? Reporting, especially TV news reporting, that you just pretty much have to observe other people doing it to even begin to get a handle on it.
I walked into a newsroom many years ago in San Francisco, and I didn't know that I was going to be working in news, right? I submitted a resume into CBS Radio, and radio did an interview, but they were like, we don't have any actual positions available. So they bumped my resume up to news many, many months later. I had no business being in a newsroom the way that Mike Weir had said to me. And I was determined. I was like, I'm going to show you that, no, I have no clue about news, but I have a work ethic that can, that I can absolutely hone in here and I can show you what I can do. So I wasn't afraid of work. And I was just really excited to be in this newsroom. When you walked up to me and you were like, you should try it out in the field. You should see what that's about. And I was like, no. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen me do anything live. I would get sick just having to do public speaking events in school. This was never something that I thought was going to be on my bingo card, to be a news reporter and go out into the field and do live shots.
Well, as you now know, it's a skill. And with any skill, 10,000 reps, you're an expert, as they say. And you just, you have fearlessness in your life. It was just, there was some fear attached to public speaking. And, you got over it. I mean, you said, let me try this. Let me do it right. Let me do it all the way. Yeah, I also was shy when I first started. I know that's hard to believe, but I really was. I was shaking in my boots at times, and especially public speaking. But I decided to face that fear early on. Like in college, I was forcing myself to go up to people and just introducing myself and just living in the awkwardness that is life because I wanted to just be on the other side of that. I wanted to not be awkward anymore. But I'll tell you what, is that journalistic exercise that all TV news people do. It really helped me break out of the shyness. The old people on the street interview where you're just having to shove a mic into people's faces and like 80% of people tell you no. And of that 80%, most of them are treating you like you're like a homeless person asking for money, shooing you away. And it's just an exercise in rejection and getting over the rejection. And if I could have, I would have crawled under my bed every single one of those rejections, but you can't. You're on a deadline. You just can't. You just keep moving forward. And what I realized, I think, after it took me a long time, is that, all right, I'm looking for people with good sound bites, right? That's what I care about. Do they have something to say? Is it going to be good? And I realized, the people who didn't want to talk probably would not have been good sound bites anyway. Maybe they were shy. Maybe they really didn't have anything to say. In some cases, I appreciated their honesty. They would say, that's a complicated subject. And no matter how I say it, I'm going to look stupid on TV and I'm not going to talk to you. And I don't blame you. Then I took every one of those lessons as an opportunity to get over all of that shyness, because all it is a fear of rejection. And then eventually it just makes your skin so thick that you're just shameless. There's nothing you could do to shame me, Paulina. I am completely shameless at this point.
I mean, because we had to be, right? When you're walking up to people, you have to get used to getting rejected and being told no constantly. And I think that's the business outside of MOS, man on the street. I feel like it's the same thing when you're applying to newsrooms. It's the same thing when you're sitting down in front of news directors and you're hoping that they take your reel and they look at it and you're getting a lot of no's before you hear that one yes.
And that's how it is out in the field. You're going up to people in their worst moments and asking if you can talk to them, and the audacity of that. It's a ridiculous notion, really, but you do it all the time. And you learn how to be empathetic and you learn how to ask in a way that's not offensive. You are going up to people and doing that. And sometimes people try to shame you and you're like, I don't have time for the shame. I'm on a deadline, move on. But early on in my career, I remember covering this. It was like a murder on New Year's Day. The family the night before, the parents had gone out for a New Year's Eve thing, and when they came back a little early, so they let their son and his friends, their 18-year-old and 19-year-olds, go driving around in the limousine because they had like another hour left in it. A stray bullet came out of nowhere and killed their son, like out of nowhere. It was not an argument. There was nothing, just a bullet fired into the limousine. And of course, it was just shocking to the community. And this young man, I think he was 19 years old, so he was right a year removed from high school. And there was almost nothing remarkable about him as society would judge. But there's a story. Everyone has a story. And at their wake, I was required to walk up to this family and just say, can we talk to you? And, brutal that is. That's just brutal. And so I did it. I made the long walk across the street and I went up to the father and I said, I'm terribly sorry. I see the community has turned out here and they loved your son. And would you mind sharing a few stories with us? And he just said, yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you everything. And we even went back to their house and he raised up the hood. And showing me the inside of a hood of a car is a useless exercise. I have no idea what's in there. But and he said, look, he goes, this was his wife. His friends would joke, this is his wife. And he liked scooping up his car or whatever. And he stayed out of trouble. And the father said, you know how difficult that is in this neighborhood to stay out of gangs and stay out of trouble? He was remarkable in that way. And I went, yeah. And I told a good story that day. And it was just a lesson that you have to try. And really, reporters do pretty well if you think about it. A pretty high percentage of people tell you yes, they want to talk about their loved ones. Because I think if it was a higher percentage of no, you couldn't live with yourself. It would be so crushing. It would be just a constant, right? You would just feel so terrible. Like A, that you had to go up to that family, and B, that you got told no yet again. I think it would be harder. be a harder job?
I think the job is hard as it is, right? Like you said, you put yourself into these positions, into these situations where you run the risk of getting rejected. Man on the street, you do get rejected often, very often. And then walking up to family members, I don't know. I think it depends on the city that I've reported in, honestly, Joe. I've had big success speaking to families, and then I've had families who the moment they see you are like, absolutely not, get out of my face. I think it depends on kind of what the political climate has been like in news and out of news and what the public opinion of news has been like. And over the years, I think it's changed from where it was, at least, a decade ago when I started learning about the news industry. You've seen the newsroom kind of go from 20 years ago to where it is today. And one, the resources are depleting. Two, we now have journalists who are MMJs, right? Multimedia journalists. And that's a job, that description that's predominantly leading the market right now. You're doing everything from your own camera work to editing, shooting, reporting, with the jobs being cut even more in newsrooms. Can you talk to me about kind of where the industry was, where you started to where it is today?
Yeah. So like when newsrooms had more people, they weren't fat, but they were, they were deep with people. Then you treated a story, the raw bits of information that we were talking about, in a way that, was more thoughtful. So for one, you may decide we're not going to run that story yet till we have a better understanding of it. That's changed. If you have fewer people in the newsroom, you've got to feed more newscasts with fewer people. You're going to just put half the story. I mean, it's just, you're going to put what you have on, right? So there's that redundancy, right? There's not as many people with eyeballs on it making good decisions. Then you have fewer people out in the field. And then you have the MMJ thing. And so, and having experienced the MMJ thing, here in San Francisco, a large market, they pretty much turned our shop into an MMJ shop. They bought out all the old timers, and the ones who were still there, like me, they said, you could, if you're going to stay, you're going to have to carry a camera. And then we had like a training session that consisted of pretty much, here's your equipment. Good luck. We're all counting on you. So we got some basic stuff, but really we were out in the field on our own pretty quickly. What happens when you are shooting, editing, doing the interviews, driving, trying to find a parking spot, which in the bigger the city, that's a consideration. That's a time consideration, right? Just trying to set it all up and do a live shot at the end of that process is you're going to have to make decisions about what you're not going to do. Now you're maybe turning in your first or second draft of your story instead of, third or fourth. You just don't have time to keep working on it, looking it over again, reading it out loud again, spending some time thinking about it, making that one more phone call. Do I have this right? I think I do. Like, you don't have time for that. It's send it in. If it gets approved, boom, let's start tracking, then start editing. And then the quality of shooting and editing is going to go down because, I worked with some great photographers through the years. These were trained people who had already had, if you're going to be a photographer, if that's how you're making your living, you probably had some semblance of understanding of photography and maybe had an eye for photography, maybe an artistic eye. They didn't ask me if I had an artistic eye, and I most definitely do not. And so I had to learn the skill, right?
Yeah.
I had to take basic photography skills. I took that on my own. It was not offered by the station. I went and just took basic photography skills I'd never had before to learn like the rule of threes and, lighting and framing. And so now I'm learning on the job in a big market like this. And then editing, I was always a pretty fast editor, but editing my own stuff on the fly was also just that alone is hard. And then to somehow at the end of that process, get your head together enough to do a live shot. I mean, there were just days where like I'd do my live shot and then I'd go home and I would just collapse. I was just so tired. Like I was wiped out, just wiped out by that's an exhausting experience. It doesn't feel sustainable. It doesn't feel like that we could do that. So yeah, a lot of transition there. But note that I'm not saying that people back in the day were better journalists or that we, somehow were better at writing or better at telling stories. If you watch stories back from like 20, 30 years ago, they're slower paced. They're not like, there's not as you couldn't get away with a lot of the stuff that you today, because you really have to get into the story and it has to move more quickly. The sound bites are shorter. There's a lot of storytelling that we've learned through the years that makes it better today. It's better storytelling overall than now. There's just the difference is the amount of time we would spend on something, taking it in, thinking about it, making sure, double checking sources, making sure it was right. All of that is compromised, and and now, like, okay, and then how about add that you have to do a social media post or 2 or 12 along the way, and it just makes you have to be Superman. I remember, like, I would just be frustrated because I worked so hard on a story, and then I'd watch it back, and it was just crap, right? It was not my best work. My best day as an MMJ was still nowhere close to my worst day as a two-person crew. I knew that, and it was obvious to me. And our bosses would be like, "No, I can't really tell the difference," but we all knew. And then, like, one day, I was looking for inspiration, and I was walking around Fisherman's Wharf near my house here in San Francisco, and they have all these street performers, and there was an actual one-man band, and he's like, clanging the cymbals between his legs, and harmonica and guitar and all that, and people are watching that guy, and I realized, well, they're not applauding him because he's making pristine music. They're applauding him because it's magic.
Because he's doing it
So
all.
what
Yeah.
an MMJ is doing is magic. A one-man band is magic, and you made it through the day, and you helped the station keep the commercials from bouncing together, and then you got to pick yourself up and do it again the next day.
I went from San Francisco seeing two people still, kind of work teams, to every station I've worked at was MMJ stations. I do want to say in San Francisco, it was the only news market that I worked in where we had security guards that would go out with us on stories regularly. And I think that was the first time that I really realized how dangerous this industry really is. The same month that I was, applying for jobs on air, we had the photographer and reporter that were killed on live TV in Virginia. That was a very big wake up call as to this is not as pretty and cookie cutter as I thought this job was.
If you sort of take a historical perspective, journalists put themselves in danger the world over, and we've been lucky in this country until relatively recently, for whatever reason. And it started here in the Bay Area. People started attacking crews and robbing them of their equipment, sometimes while they were on live TV, and it was just absolutely shocking. Yeah, you had that situation in Virginia where the shooting happened, and some others, but we were routinely being robbed and photographers being attacked, and so, like, that put a great deal of fear into the crews. There was a lot of tension between the outside and inside cats, as you can imagine. We're trying to protect ourselves, and it wasn't being taken as seriously as we thought it should have been. And so there were tons of conversations about, how do we fix this? How do we keep the inevitable from happening? One of us is going to get hurt. We're just going to get killed one day, where someone's going to die. And they would go, "Oh, no one's going to die, but okay." And then next thing you know, we had, armed guards accompanying us. There were, like, hiccups along the way. Those armed guards are expensive, so they experimented with guards that weren't armed, and that didn't go over well. And then there were, like, the fly-by-night security crews. There was this one guy who was our security guard. He just showed up, like, "Whatever happened to the other company?" And they're like, "Oh, they're cutting money, and they gave us this guy." And seemed like a nice enough guy, but the car he showed up in was so bashed up. It looked like it had been totaled in a car wreck, like a horrible car wreck, like the likes of which it didn't seem like anyone could have survived. And so, like, that he would get in that car from the passenger side and then drive away. And then, like, he would show up to guard us, and then we're, like, interviewing the mayor, and this guy shows up, and everyone goes, "Oh my God, what happened?" And I go, "Oh, it's just my car." That's our security guard. That's his car. So then we went back to the ones that were former cops, who were more expensive but knew what they were doing, and they would spend a lot of time just kind of making sure no one entered the area where we were working. Because you know how it is, like, you're in that live truck, you're just blind to the world. You're just on your laptop, you're trying to write your story on deadline, you're just trying to get it all together. Photographers running around with that expensive equipment, just sometimes oblivious to the possibility of being a crime victim. But yeah, it just got ugly, right? It just And it still is. Like, I feel for the people who are still doing that across America, because it's a business model. This is not, well, let's just see how it works out. They've decided they're going to live with the risk, and they're going to put people in harm's way. And luckily, most people don't harm journalists, but it happens,
I want to say San Francisco is one of the cities where we saw it the most. Like it was the most prevalent, the amount of crime towards journalists. And it was from, I think it was Anne Makovic who was doing a live shot and her photog got, pistol whipped on live TV. And then to yourself, Joe, I mean, I think you're being very modest here because you had your own near-death experience on the job.
Well, I mean, it escalated, right? It went from, robberies to, like, we knew someone was going to get hurt. I was hoping it wouldn't be me, and I didn't get hurt by it, but my guard was shot in a robbery. The robbers came up, they pointed the gun at the photographer. He said, just take the camera here. And then without any further discussion, they fired a shot at our guard and hit him in the hip. So he's bleeding on the sidewalk, but he sees them sort of drag the camera away. They can't figure out how to take it off the tripod. What are they going to use that camera for? There's no use for that camera. They don't have the proprietary other equipment. They just saw something expensive and were going to rob him. So then the security guard is on the sidewalk. They dragged the camera away, and then they came back and pointed a gun at his face and said, "What else do you have?" At that point, I think he was worried about our safety. We're on the other side of the truck. So the security guard said, "Here, take my phone," hands them his cell phone, knowing that it could track them, but also to distract them. And then at that point, he pulled his weapon and then fired 4 shots at one of the robbers. And so he now has wounded the robber who's bleeding, and they get in the car and they drive away. They drop the one robber at the hospital. Then the other guy is just driving around town, and they're tracking him, and they eventually catch him. So there's that's shocking to say the least. It was 6:00 on a Sunday in front of a library. I was doing a story about a teacher's strike, but in an area of Oakland that I'd been thousands of times before. But in this case, these robbers decided to go for anyone with a camera. They had been robbing film crews, like people shooting movies in the Bay Area, and any tourist with an expensive camera. And so we were next. And then eventually, as you know, it escalated to the point where they ended up murdering one of those armed security guards that was protecting a journalist. And I think that's when things started to finally go, oh, maybe someone is going to get hurt. And some of the things that we'd been suggesting through the years, just howling about, we've got to protect ourselves. We've got to stop being sitting ducks. We have to stop doing as many live shots as we can. How about we do, we record our stand-ups on camera, and then the audience does not know the difference. They don't. Like, people would say to me, I usually work night side, right? And they would say, "Man, I see you all the time. Like, I saw you one time at 11 o'clock at night, and then I swear I saw you at 5 o'clock in the morning." I'm like, yeah, one of those is recorded. So it's not like we're deceiving people. They don't expect us to be at City Hall. Like, really, if you told them we were at City Hall at 11 o'clock at night, most reasonable people would be like, what are you doing that for? The meeting was over 3 hours previously. Just what are you doing? And especially in an environment when you are vulnerable to robbers who've proven that they could get violent. So eventually they started, implementing some of the things that we've been asking for, which is, I think they're now shooting some stories just on an iPhone, so they don't have to take out the expensive camera. They're not putting themselves in unnecessary live shot situations. Now, look, if there's breaking news, it's what we do. There's some risk. I mean, every one of us would say, okay, I get it. There's some risk. We got to go take the risk. There's a riot. I know that's dangerous, but that's what I do. Right. It's the unnecessary ones, right? It's the unnecessary ones. So I think they're starting to do that now, but it wasn't long after that, maybe 2 years after that incident with me, or 2.5 years, 3 years, that I moved along and got out of the news business. And it was time anyway. I'd spent 35 years or something in, and that was a shocking situation. I wanted to see my family more after that, and I was done. I had done as much as I was tired of going to fires, and I knew when that day came, it was time to go. Right? I didn't want to be that guy in the corner of the newsroom going, "What? Oh, that's boring." only 4 people died. That's boring. But definitely that violent situation, that violent robbery had something to do with me deciding to stop being Joe Newsman anymore.
I'm lucky enough, I have not had any near-death experiences like that, or I've not seen any of my guards or anybody like that shot in front of me. But we've had a lot of tense moments, right? Like Kentucky was definitely one of them where our station was we had like smoke bombs thrown into the building when we were in there, and then we were evacuated to the bottom. Our crews were getting, attacked by protesters left and right out in the field. And so we had bulletproof vests at some point, just to go to work. There is a level of risk. And I think that, again, yes, there is a risk that you're willing to take, but then there are risks that you're like, this just seems like it's unnecessary. Severe weather, I thought that was always a risk that we should be taking, right? We should be informing the public. When it comes to like door knocking and doing certain things on your own, that's where you have to start assessing, like, is this still worth it? And the pay keeps going down. The amount of resources keeps going down. And it's the overall model, right? Like, is it still worth it to be in the industry?
We spent a lot of time in underserved communities, and that is journalism. What's going on here? The violence in American cities and in some underserved communities, it's a big part of the story. And you can't just abandon these communities. What kind of journalist are you if you don't go cover those stories? But we just got to do it smarter. Like you mentioned, war zones and wearing a a vest, right? Well, if you went to an actual war zone, you act a certain way. You don't stand out. You do wear protection. You stand up to do your stand up, shoot video here and there, keep your head down. You don't do live shots if your life is at risk. So, I mean, you have to be smart like that and start acting like, we've learned something from the process. I will tell you, too, that newsrooms are starting to get it, but we're a long way from really implementing any of this stuff. But after our situation, well, let me ask you this way. What do you think the first thing the assignment desk asked me when they finally made contact with me? What did they ask me?
Were you rolling and did you get video?
Yeah, do you have video? And I said, we're safe, we're okay. Thanks for asking. uh,
It's a
but I
very
also,
weird industry. Like they will ask you for video first and then will ask you if you're okay.
but I mean, like I've spent my entire adult life in a newsroom. I expected no less, right? I that's exactly what I expected. And yes, I was rolling when our guard was put in the ambulance because that's what I do. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And yes, we shot a kind of a situationer, if you will, where the photographer and I were on camera and just explaining what happened to us. We sent that in for the 6 and 11. That's what we do, right? But then we went to the police station. And while we're waiting to talk to the detectives, the assistant news director texted. She said, why don't you take tomorrow off? And I was like, really? Why don't I just shake it off? Why don't I just go for a jog, like run it off? I mean, I think she meant well, but like, no, I'm taking more than tomorrow off. This is earth shattering. My photographer was like, he ended up taking months off because he was so rattled by all of that. And no, I took a few weeks off, a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks off. Luckily, I belong to a union here, and my union immediately came up with like, we need to get you a counselor to talk to. Do you think the newsroom could use the resources that we have to have a counselor come into the newsroom? And I said, yes. And so they sent someone into the newsroom to talk to anybody who wanted to talk. And it was a valuable resource, not the idea of the company, mind you, it was the union's idea. I said I did want to talk to, someone because I did not understand PTSD, but I knew it was coming. I felt fine in the moment and really for another day or so, but then I knew it was going to be a crash. I just wanted to know what was on the way, what was going to happen to me. And so it's not like it keeps all that stuff from happening. It's just that if you see it coming, you go, okay, this is what they talked about. That's why I'm feeling, out angry in an outsized manner toward my bosses, or there's just like a checklist of things that are going to happen to you. So it's good to know those are coming and that what's happening to your mind is part of the process. While we were at the police station, we finally get to talk to the detective, right? And he says, back to like, are you going to work to like, when are you going back to work? And I told him what my boss said, take tomorrow off. And he was just absolutely floored by that, because the police, he said, like 20 years ago, if you were in a shooting and you were the one who shot somebody and it wasn't that bad, they just put you back on the street. Right now, they've come to a point all these years later where they recognize PTSD, how it can hurt cops, how some of them become suicidal. Like it's a thing.
Yeah.
PTSD. So he says now they've gotten to the point now where anyone who was near the shooting, anyone who's associated, who responded to the shooting, has to get cleared by, a therapist before they're back on the street. So not just the person who was involved in it, but anyone who was at the scene, they have to be checked out by the therapist and get the green light before they're back on the street. So journalism needs to figure out what the best practices are in that aspect, and also understand that most journalists' PTSD doesn't come from a violent incident like that, but from years and years doing interviews with disaster victims. That we have people walking around with some serious PTSD that we need to address. I've been out of the business now like 4 years now or so, and it's taken me the bulk of this time to like clear my head, get a lot of that fog out, to come to a better place and understand that, wow, I knew that that I was dealing with some stuff, but I didn't realize how much.
That was the overall arching conversation that I've had with just about everybody who's left the industry here in Vegas. I left, in I think 2021, the first time, and I don't feel like I was that bad, but that's because I was dealing with some of my own stuff and I left, because I wanted to. This time, I don't know that I left at the time that I wanted to, right? And I think that was the difference between it. It was like, okay, I have to make a way for myself. I did find a way for myself. But all this stuff started to come up, and all of a sudden I had all this time to start really reflecting on my own life, and then all the stuff that I've experienced and the things that you've seen in news, and it was heavy. And I feel like I'm still dealing with it. I had the mental health podcast. I had to take a step back and just be like, I can't do this because I feel like I'm back in news. And while there's a part of me that wants to keep telling the story, I feel like all I'm doing is re-triggering myself every time I tell these stories. And so I had to take a step back because it wrecked my mental health. And I have friends here who were let go as well, or friends who left the industry. And they're like, Paulina, we took almost 6 months before we were back to normal after they left the industry. And I don't think we realized, because we're so inundated and we're so saturated, and we just, journalists just go, go, go.
It's a lot. I mean, it's so much that I can't remember a lot of the stories I did. I mean, you do so many, and it's just like, okay, next, and here comes another. And I will deal with this by just keeping going. And there will be another story tomorrow, and it will erase the memory of this one. But yeah, it really does start to add up. I don't fully understand it, but I know that newsrooms need to do better.
I think we're starting to see some newsrooms implement mental health, or at least it's becoming a conversation in the newsrooms. Is it implemented in the way that it's actually helping the people who are out on the story? I don't know. I think maybe some are executing that better than others. But back to your point with like police, that everybody has to get cleared before they come back. We're definitely not doing that in newsrooms, right? And we should be, because we are seeing a lot of the same stuff that police are. Maybe we're not in the middle of everything, but we are witnessing a lot of it. And I know in different cities, different states, we don't have the same provisions. Kentucky, they wouldn't cover the body until the coroner got there. So a lot of the times you were coming up to a scene, you saw everything, blood, guts, and then some. And you were staring at it for hours. This is also why we see suicide rates in the industry go up. People are talking more about mental health and the experiences that they've had. And it's fatigue. It's the fact that we are losing people in the newsrooms. The jobs are getting cut. We don't have enough resources. And then now on top of that, like you said, that's not actually a strategy to just move on to the next story, and all you're doing is just compounding that trauma and those issues.
We don't stop to think about it. We don't stop to read a book sometimes, right? Because we're just off to the next story. So I think that we all know that we feel it. There's something going on in our brains. Like, this isn't good. But let's go drink it off and go to the next one. That's not a strategy.
It's not, but it is the strategy that we see in this industry, right? Whether, we talked about it with Toy on the first episode, whether it was alcohol or weed or whatever else other people are dabbling in or extracurricular activities you may or may not have. We all find a way to cope in this industry, and some healthier ways than others. So,
yeah. I mean, I want to make it clear. I loved it the entire time.
Yeah, no.
Even when it was killing me, I loved it. But I love it so much that it needs to do better. There's good people that are just being absolutely put through the ringer. And now it's like, now that we know better, we owe the future generations of journalists the knowledge that we have. We owe them better.
I agree with you. And I love the industry, right? I'm happy to be on this side of things, but man, I mean, you put me in certain things and once that news brain comes back on, I want to be back in there, right? And so this is why I stay away from news right now, because I don't know that I've fully healed from everything, but we can all agree that there are things that we know are not working in this industry and we need help on and we need resources on and we need to start talking about them at the very least before we keep sweeping them under the rug. But now that you've been out of the industry, Joe, it's been 4 years. Talk to me about kind of what that transition's been like and finding yourself outside of news.
I mean, I spent some time as a consultant to government agencies, police, and district attorneys, helping them be transparent. So, like, given the skill set as a reporter to know that, having been on the other side as a reporter, they need to do a better job, police agencies, at sharing information with the public. And they have to do a better job because now a lot of stuff is caught on camera, whether it's a citizen or the body camera of the police department. So I just spent a lot of time talking to them about, here's how you can be transparent. Just tell the public what you can. And if there are things you have to hold back, like the police don't want to jeopardize the investigation, so there's a few things they've got to hold back, then just say there's things we have to hold back. We don't want to tell the whole thing now, but we will in the fullness of time. And over time, I think they can rebuild their relationship with the public. It's interesting because when I got out of news, I wasn't sure I had any skills that would transfer. And in fact, my boss, who was a former reporter, she would say, just be you, just do what you know how to do. I'm like, okay. And then they would say, can you make a communications plan? And I'd go, is that a live shot at 6 or 11? What the hell is a communications plan? And so there were a lot of things that did not transfer. But what did transfer was, look, here's how you communicate. Here's how you talk to reporters. Here's how you talk to the public. Here's how transparency works and why it's being demanded and what you can do to, deal with it, do a better job. A lot of that really did transfer. And then the other thing I've been working on is just in terms of communicating with the public, because newsrooms have depleted themselves. Now it's incumbent on not just these agencies, but across the board. If anybody has anything to say to the public, they've got to do it via social media. The reporters are not coming. There's not enough reporters to cover everything anymore. They're not coming to cover your story, so you have to tell it yourself. And so I spent a lot of time talking to people about how to appear on camera, how to tell a story, how to do essentially these short form videos. They're less than a minute long, drawing on a lot of the skills that we learned as reporters, but coaching them how I coached you and so many other people, and how to just how to stand in front of a camera, look into the camera, the eye of the camera, and talk like you're talking to your best friend, but leave out the cuss words, all those things we used to talk about. And then so now it's all, subtitles, which they call captions. It's short form, it's vertical, which I hate. But this is where everyone lives. If you look at people, they're just always on their feed. And for whatever reason, in this moment in time, all of the social media companies are feeding you video. You were just looking at your niece's graduation photos, and next thing you know, I'm watching videos one after another. So, just been teaching people how to take advantage of that. And so that's what I'm transitioning to now. I've left this consultancy and now I'm making these videos, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I'll be making them and coaching people up and helping people tell their stories. And that was, telling stories is what I was born to do anyway. So it sort of I got a good education, and now it's time for me to, take that and run with it.
How do you find yourself after news, though? I know that you have a lot of skills outside of news that you're now leaning into as well. You sing. That was one of the things that I know that you used to do as a hobby, but you can kind of lean into that. But when you left news, how did you kind of find yourself again?
Well, I'm Joe Newsman,
That's what I'm saying.
right?
Like you
I'm
had
still Joe
35
Newsman.
years in this, Joe. Like
Yeah.
that's not
Well,
like
that was a turn, and now suddenly I'm at the table with police, and I'm helping them, and I'm at their meetings. I attended a lot of meetings where there was like a pledge of allegiance, and like they're bringing in the colors, and it's not my world at all, and I'm having to adjust accordingly. But no, there was a sort of sense of a loss of identity or identity adrift, and I don't want to paint that as something that I was upset about, because I really was ready to move on from reporting. And so I was fine with being behind the scenes and not getting any glory and not being on camera. At the end of the day, I still think like a reporter. It proved to be valuable when helping clients. Hey, a reporter just called and they want to do an interview. What's going to happen? Like, here's what they're going to ask you. And I knew every question in what order. And, I could write their news conferences for them. There was not for me, any much concern in terms of my ego about whether people still recognized me or knew me as the news guy. There was a sort of sense of mourning when I see a story. I just go, I got to do that story. I'm like, how am I going to do that story? I still see stories every day. And like, I'm like that kid in that movie who sees dead people. I see stories. I see stories everywhere, and that will never leave me. And I still am compelled to find a way to tell those stories. I'm going to find a way. I haven't figured it out yet. They're everywhere. I live in an area that's kind of quirky and has a lot of people stories, and I trip over them on the way to go get coffee. So I just got to. I'm still working that out, to be honest, but it won't be. I don't think I'll be working for a mainstream news outlet. I don't think that's in the cards anymore. Really, my job is to take my daughter to volleyball and make sure she's taken care of, and she's in high school. That's my main job. Everything else is details.
what about your hobbies? Let's talk about your hobbies because you've turned that into now partially an income.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I sing. So yeah, I've always been a singer, as you know, and I'm always singing. But because I worked nights all those years, I didn't really have the chance to get up on stages very much. My neighbor Ned, he's a jazz guitarist his whole adult life, and he's always playing somewhere. And every now and then there would be like, oh, there's a crime scene. The crime scene is near where he's playing, so I'd run over there, get up on the stage, sing a couple songs, and then like race back and do my live shot. Through the years, that added up to a number of performances. And then when I got out, yeah, I started hanging out with those guys and doing more and more performances, and it's to the point now where I'm singing several nights a week around San Francisco. And yet, they just people don't pay musicians very much money. It's not sustainable on its own, sadly, because I would just drop everything and do that. That's how much I love doing it. I was Joe Newsman, and now I'm Joe Bluesman, and let's see how that works. We'll see.
I love that. I love that. I love the transition. I love this new version of Joe that's a little bit, you're always relaxed, I feel, even in the newsroom, but now it's kind of getting to see this more casual side of Joe, right? And that's the difference between news and out of news.
I'll say I was always relaxed, especially when I had a big story. When I was not relaxed, though, was a crap story. If I had a bad story, everybody's been in that situation. Oh God, this is a terrible story. I want nothing to do with it. I don't want my name on this. I don't want to spend a minute working on it. And I knew all those years that the only way out of a bad story is to come up with a better one. So I'd be constantly like calling people like, get me out of this story. So I was like pretty much on edge if I ever had a crap story, because I knew I had to do it, you know, turn that chicken crap into chicken salad, and got good at that. I always thought, I got a few Emmys, but really there should be an Emmy for that, right? Turning that absolute piece of crap into a story.
The creativity that goes into it.
That's where you make your money, I think. I really do. That happens more days than the big stories for sure, right? Like here, turn this into something. Okay. Let's give them the old razzle dazzle. That's what we do.
That is what we do.
To me, that was harder than everything else. It was just desperation. Trying to find any lick of inspiration in that desperation. Oh, see, that's triggering me. All the rest I'm fine with, and that's just killing me right now. I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Bad stories are what trigger you. I cannot. Joe.
I would go to the ends of the earth for a good story, and by the end of my career, I was like, I'm not going across the street for this one.
Yeah.
I don't want to go. I don't want to leave the newsroom for this one. It's so bad.
Joe, for anybody who's kind of in the industry, on their way out of the industry, who's thinking about leaving because of all the changes that are happening, what are your words of advice to them?
Well, I would just say that maybe you'll have the same concerns that I did, which is I don't know if I have any transferable skills, right? Will someone really hire me if I'm, all I know how to do are live shots and packages? And it's such a narrow, set of skills. But yeah, it turns out if you're paying attention that there are some skills involved in this, and writing and communications advisor. And I think that being a PR person takes some skills that maybe we don't have, like patience. I always wondered why we had just these garbled news releases that just looks like somebody just stirred it up and made a word salad out of it. Now I know, because there's always people behind the scenes saying, put this in there and then put that in there. And the PR person just does it and they hand it to the reporter, right? So like that takes a lot of patience. Also, I'll just have I would constantly have these situations where I would go, all right, can we work on this project? And they'd go, let's meet next Tuesday. And then next Tuesday would come along and they would go, oh yeah, let's not do it today. How about 2 Fridays from now? And you could just knock it out and be done in 10 minutes. And that just irked the crap out of me for quite some time. And then I realized, wait, I'm getting paid the same amount, whether it's done this Tuesday or next Tuesday. And I just got to let that go. There will be some transitions like that, but that like reporters are smart and you learn how to be adaptive. And especially now, like what I'm trying to do now with these short form videos, that doesn't exist. That is to say, if you looked for a job as the short form video producer, that's not on LinkedIn, it's not a job per se, but everyone needs it, right? I mean, right now in this moment, everyone needs to be doing these videos, because how else are you going to tell people about what you do? TV news is dying. Buying a commercial is not going to help you as much as it did a couple of years ago. Even you got to get in people's feeds. Having a website, that's so 2019. You got to get in people's social media feeds, and the most effective way of doing it is video. And people are afraid to get on video. They're just like when we were talking about when you first started. I go, I don't know if I can do this. I'm scared to talk in public. Once I help them develop a skill, they realize, oh, no wonder so many people are doing this on TikTok and what have you. They just happen to be more shameless than I am yet.
I think we definitely have a lot of transferable skills, right? And I say this over and over. What you were saying about how it would take us 10 minutes to do something, but we're pushing it off for the next 2 weeks. The outside world does not, that was my biggest thing, right? I'm like, the news wants you to do it today on deadline in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
The outside world does not work like that. They're like, we'll call you in a week. We'll call you in a day. Yeah. I was like, what? For me, it was slowing down, and I don't do very well slowing down.
I know, but it is like what I came to terms with is I'd say, well, let me think about this. They'd send me something and I'd say, I'm just going to do it tomorrow. And then I'd do it. And I'd feel guilty because I waited a whole day to do something that could have taken me 5 minutes. But sometimes that extra time to think about it actually is beneficial. And we didn't have that extra time in news. But I'll leave you with this thought. You're talking about transferable skills and you just use what you have, right? I think that's true. But it doesn't always work there was this banquet that my boss was supposed to host and she couldn't make it. And so she said, you do it. And I was like, what do I know about hosting a bunch of people at a dinner and then paying the bill and all this other stuff? She said, just use, just do what you know how to do. And so there was this dinner at this fancy restaurant. And of course, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But there was a band there, a jazz band. So I got up and I sang. And, knocked them dead. And then that's all they were talking about was my singing. So I guess I used what I have. I guess I transferred those skills. I mean, I don't know if the bill added up or any of that importance, but I got to sing a few songs and then people were like, bedazzled. So I just use what I have, whether it applies or not.
All the skills you have, right? I went back to painting and I'm glad that I did. I have more time. I have more.
Oh, yeah. Is all that stuff yours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen the room. It's nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The only one that's not mine is this rabbit on the side that I have. But everything else I've created myself here. So from walls to canvases, I love it. And it's again something I couldn't do in news, or I couldn't do enough of because there's just never the time.
Well, can I just say, I'm so proud of the woman you've become. And I know that girl who walked into the newsroom here in San Francisco, who was full of, energy and determination and fight sometimes. I don't think is a bad thing. To see you evolve and to see you, what you've become, it really makes me proud. And I'm proud to be your mentor. And I look forward to many more of these podcasts. Keep up the good work. It's important what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot of conversations coming up. And I think because I've niched down to kind of what I know, which is news, I'm not ready to go back into it. But there's a lot of conversations to be had around news and in and out of the industry that I don't think people are talking about. So there's a lot of these to come, hopefully.
Good.
Well, on that note, Joe, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. Everyone, and that's it for the Honey Pot. We'll see you again right here on Thursday next week. Want more? Join our Patreon for legal insights, mental health support, and beauty giveaways.